Number 9. P40 Kittyhawk. On June 28, 1942, Royal Air Force RAF Flight Sergeant Dennis Copping was tasked with flying a damaged P40 Kittyhawk fighter plane to a British airfield in Egypt for repairs. But it never arrived, and for the next 70 years the aircraft and pilot's fate remained a mystery. A Polish oil worker stumbled upon the wreck in 2012 during a work expedition in the Sahara Desert. Historians described the astonishingly well-preserved aircraft as the aviation equivalent of Tutankhamun's tomb. The plane appeared to be almost frozen in time, with guns and ammo still on board, where they were likely left untouched since the day of the crash. There were even bullet holes in the aircraft's spine, indicating that Flight Sergeant Copping may have had to make an emergency landing after being shot at. On the other hand, the P-40 was already damaged before it took flight, so this may have had something to do with why it crashed. At the time of the discovery, Copping's remains were nowhere to be found. A month later, though, a team of historians found human remains roughly 3 miles from the crash site, along with a piece of torn parachute, a metal button dated to 1939, and a keychain bearing the number 61. It hasn't been confirmed that the remains belong to Copping, but his absence from the wreckage strongly suggests that he survived the crash and perished elsewhere, probably while trying to reach safety. Number 8. A dictator's past. North Korean dictator Kim Jong-un is the third in his family's line of succession to rule the Hermit Kingdom. And while he claims to hail from a prestigious lineage known as the Paek-tu bloodline, a remote cemetery on the South Korean island of Jeju suggests otherwise. Situated on an obscure corner of the island, the graveyard contains at least 13 headstones belonging to Kim's relatives through his mother, Ko Yong-hui. Ko was born in 1952 and was of South Korean and Japanese heritage, something the Kim dynasty has avoided confronting, perhaps because they see it as a threat to their legitimacy. But several of Kim Jong-un's maternal ancestors, including his great-grandfather, are buried at the cemetery. Their headstones are old and overgrown, standing in stark contrast to the preserved remains of Kim's father and grandfather, who lie in state at the Kumsusan Palace of the Sun in Pyongyang. The graves were discovered in 2014 by South Korean journalists as part of a mission to uncover Kim Jong-un's ancestry. After the media revealed their findings, at least one of the plaques were removed by a distant relative of Kim Jong-un's to prevent vandalism. Number 7. Pine Gap. Deep in the Australian outback, there's a jointly operated U.S. satellite surveillance base and Australian Earth station known as Pine Gap. It's located roughly 11 miles southwest of Alice Springs. It's run by high-ranking personnel from the Central Intelligence Agency, CIA, the National Security Agency, NSA, and the National Reconnaissance Office, NRO. There are over 800 employees operating the site, which consists of a massive computer complex that's used for controlling U.S. spy satellites as they pass over the Middle East, China, and Russia's Asian regions, an area spanning roughly 1/3 of the Earth. The remote location was chosen for its strategic significance, mainly the fact that it's too far away for spy ships to intercept its signal. Pine Gap is considered essential to both national and global security. Its intelligence-gathering satellites are used for identifying the location of airstrikes, nuclear weapons, and other military and intelligence sites that U.S. officials think it's in the country's best interest to know about. The name Pine Gap may sound familiar to you. That's because there's a Netflix series with the same name, and it's based on insider information from a 23-year NSA veteran who knows what life is like at the base. Number 6. Mount Weather. Located in rural Virginia's Blue Ridge Mountains, the Mount Weather Emergency Operations Center, also known as the High Point Special Facility, is a high-security government facility that serves as the center of operations for the Federal Emergency Management Agency, FEMA. The facility also contains a bunker where top-ranking government officials would go in the event of a serious disaster compromising national security, and is an alternate site for the U.S. Department of Homeland Security's National Operations Center. The 564-acre site was originally used as a weather station during the 19th century, but the public was largely unaware of its existence until 1974, when news reports emerged about a passenger plane that crashed nearby, bringing the facility into the public eye for the first time. Government officials have activated the emergency use of Mount Weather at least a handful of times, including during a major power outage in Washington, D.C. in 2015. In an interview with NBC Washington's I-Team, Jacob Rosenthal, a former top aide to Attorney General Robert F. Kennedy, said that he was sent to the bunker in 1962. He described it as being located in the bowel of the mountain and said it had enough space to accommodate 2,000 top federal officials. Documents obtained by NBC under the Freedom of Information Act, FOIA, reveal that the facility contains a medical unit, a cafeteria, bunk beds, a wastewater management facility, training rooms, and more. There's not a lot of information about Mount Weather available to the public, and even the people who live in the towns surrounding it know almost nothing about it. Number 5. Hidden ancient settlements. Around 1500 years ago, ancient societies began establishing large, densely populated urban centers in the southwest corner of the Amazon basin. This is a place that, until recently, researchers didn't think anyone used to live in. Much to their surprise, these settlements were incredibly large and complex, complete with miles of elevated roadways and earthen mounds measuring as tall as 72 feet high. A recent study examining the area constitutes the latest findings in a growing body of evidence that parts of the Amazon that were once thought to be untouched were actually home to thriving societies. While it's been known for quite some time that humans have lived in the vast Amazon basin for at least 10,000 years, experts previously believed that all Amazonian people traveled in small nomadic tribes. Early European explorers described seeing villages and towns, but those who came after saw no evidence of these settlements and didn't think the soil was suitable for farming. But in the early 2000s, researchers began to think differently. This was after discovering large populations of domesticated plants and nutrient-rich soil that appeared to be man-made. In recent years, deforestation in the Amazon has revealed large earthen mounds, proving that ancient societies shaped their surroundings. Slowly but surely, evidence of long-term human occupation appeared, but it was difficult to investigate these sites due to the dense vegetation. The most recent piece of the puzzle came thanks to a remote sensing technique called LiDAR, which enables archaeologists to look below the thick plant life and even the soil to identify hidden structures left behind by past cultures. Many mysteries remain regarding the people who lived in these settlements and why they up and vanished at some point in time, but knowing they were there marks a first step to answering these lingering questions. Number 4. Ancient migration route. There are thousands of islands scattered throughout the South Pacific. Some of the first people to travel there were a group called the Lapita, who reached some of the region's farther places around 3,000 years ago. Along with them, they brought their languages, tools, pottery, and domestic animals. But the exact migration patterns of the Lapita are somewhat mysterious. For example, researchers have long believed that they avoided Papua New Guinea, presumably because there were already people living there, but a new study shows that they lived on the southern tip of the landmass on Brooker Island. The oldest layer of sediment at what's known as the Gatunka archaeological site contains the bones of numerous species that the Lapita brought with them, including pigs, dogs, and rats. A more recent layer on top of it was filled with tools and pottery that are specific to the culture, proving that they did settle in Papua New Guinea. Included among the items were obsidian objects sourced from outside the island, as well as blades that may have been used for tattooing. The Lapita's presence was sparse and infrequent at first, but they developed a more permanent presence over time. Evidence shows that they intensified their sea turtle hunting and that their material culture became more complex as the settlement became more established. Humans have inhabited Papua New Guinea for around 50,000 years. Unlike some of the places the Lapita settled, they weren't the first people to arrive there. In fact, their interactions with other cultures may have prompted them to eventually look elsewhere for a place to live. Land researcher Ben Shaw said that the team found the Gatunka site by a seemingly random stroke of luck, along with the local community's help and permission, earning them a distinction as one of the paper's senior authors. Number 3. The world's oldest tree. An Alerce tree that was born at least 5,000 years ago at the beginning of the Bronze Age still stands tall in Chile's Alerce Costero National Park. The species grows incredibly slowly and lives for a very long time. With a trunk diameter of more than 13 feet, the recently discovered specimen's estimated age is based on its massive size. Nicknamed the Alerce Milenario, it's attracted more than 10,000 annual visitors to the park since the remote property was made more accessible in recent years. Unfortunately, many visitors step and climb on the tree's roots, putting its health and life in danger. Environmental scientist Jonathan Barichevich, who conducted a recent study on the Alerce Milenario, said that only around 28% of the tree is actually still alive, and most of its living parts are in the roots where people like to step. He doesn't fault park guests who are unknowingly damaging the tree's last living parts, but he told Newsweek that he considers the tree to be like a family member and that he finds it heartbreaking to see it being actively destroyed. Barichevich comes from a long line of tree protectors, including park rangers who saw it as their duty to ensure the longevity of the forest. In fact, he's so concerned with avoiding any needless damage to the Alerce Milenario that he's avoided carrying out the procedures necessary for determining its true age because doing so could harm the tree. To him, it's not about claiming the title for the world's oldest tree, but estimating its age without jeopardizing its health. Number 2. Prehistoric human tooth. Around 130,000 years ago, or perhaps before then, a young woman lived and died in a remote cave in what is now Laos. In 2018, scientists unearthed one of her molars at the site, known as Cobra Cave. A closer look at the tooth revealed that it didn't come from the modern human species Homo sapiens, but it also didn't resemble the tooth of Homo erectus, an archaic species who was the first among our ancestors to walk upright. But the molar did look like it could belong to a Denisovan, an extinct close relative of modern humans whose DNA has persisted into some of today's populations. Denisovan DNA worked its way into the human genetic code at least 50,000 years ago when they crossed paths with Homo sapiens and mated. And while it hasn't been proven yet that the tooth belonged to a Denisovan, scientists are pretty sure of it. They said that there's a small chance that the molar could have belonged to a Neanderthal, but that it's unlikely. It could also belong to a hybrid individual, in other words, someone of mixed Homo sapiens and Denisovan descent, or perhaps even an unknown hominin group. That, according to archaeologist Katarina Duka, who spoke with CNN. But for now, all signs point toward it being a Denisovan tooth. And if that's the case, it could help to unlock mysteries about the ancient species movement and its intermingling with modern humans. It could be the furthest south that Denisovan remains have been found. All other evidence has put them in North Asia, yet modern genetics indicate that they did migrate south at some point, and the discovery would reinforce that narrative. The team that carried out the original research plans to try extracting DNA from the tooth and to continue excavating at the site in hopes of discovering more clues about what went on there in the distant past. Number 1. Ancient Sandal. In 2019, a hiker discovered a piece of footwear that was obviously very old. He found it on an icy Norwegian mountain pass known as Horse Ice Patch. The hiker notified experts with Secrets of the Ice, who specialize in studying artifacts found in glaciers and ice. By the time archaeologists received the discoverer's photos, GPS coordinates, and report, it was calling for heavy snow in the region. They only had 1 day to go and retrieve the sandal before they ran the risk of having it reburied in snow, possibly for years to come. In what archaeologist Espen Finstead described to Live Science as a long day, a team miraculously managed to recover the footwear. They radiocarbon dated the sandal to around 300 AD and recovered several other artifacts from nearby, including textiles and frozen horse manure. None of the objects are as old as the sandal. Most date to the Viking Age between 800 and 1066 AD. Speaking with Science Norway, Finstead said that he believes the people who traveled the region's routes knew what they were doing, and that the sandal's owner would have lined his or her footwear with fabric, animal skin, or some other material that would make them more wearable in the cold. He theorized that the person may have tossed the sandal aside after it became too damaged to wear anymore. Finstead also pointed out how the remote mountainous region sees little human traffic today, but this was a different story in the prehistoric world. The evidence shows that people were clearly unafraid to travel over long distances and venture into treacherous territory. Number 10. Old Trolleys. Deep in a forest in western Pennsylvania, there's a bizarre collection of old train and trolley cars from Philadelphia, Cleveland, and Boston. The collection sits on some abandoned railroad tracks. At first glance, they look like they've been in a wreck. They're rusting, overgrown, and covered in graffiti with broken windows and other visible damage. A local legend allegedly claims that there was a horrible accident at the site in 1957 and that the cars left behind are believed to be haunted. The story reached an even wider audience in 2015 when pictures taken by photographer Seth Lawless went viral. But it's unclear whether there truly is any folklore surrounding the site, and there's little evidence to suggest that this is the case. And even if there is, the story of the trolley tragedy simply isn't true. The real story is that a rail enthusiast named Ed Metka bought the cars during the early 90s and had them moved to the tracks, which he bought specifically for their storage. His plan was to fix up and resell the cars to cities for tourism purposes, but the person he hired to restore them died unexpectedly. As of 2015, Metka was still trying to sell the cars, which he estimates would cost $1.5 million each to renovate. For now, they continue to sit in their seemingly post-apocalyptic state in the middle of the woods. Number 9. A secret village. A remote Swiss-German village sits in the hills of Argentina called La Cumbrecita. It looks strikingly out of place with its German street signs, giant cuckoo clock that greets visitors upon entry, and restaurants that sell traditional European cuisine. The town's roots date back to 1932, when a German couple living in Buenos Aires named the Kapjolskis began searching for a place to build their vacation home. Missing the mountains of their hometown region, the pair bought a large property in the valley of Calmuchita, which at the time had no vegetation or roads. But it did have a waterfall, and this was good enough for the Kapjolskis. They started building and planted thousands of trees, including spruces and pines, which are not native to the region. As part of their goal to make the environment as Bavarian-esque as possible, the couple leased out plots to people who agreed to build their homes and businesses in a Swiss-German architectural style. Around 1,500 residents live in La Cumbrecita today, where the Kapjelski family continues to run the local bar. The unique outpost welcomes around 300,000 visitors every year. Number 8. The Monsters of Bolzano. Also known as the Sacro Bosco or Sacred Grove and the Parco dei Mostri or the Park of the Monsters, the Garden of Bolzano is a monumental complex located in the Viterbo province of Italy's Lazio region. Built during the Renaissance, it can be found in a wooded valley beneath the castle of Orsini. The park features a series of bizarre sculptures including a monstrous fish head, a giant ripping another giant in half, a war elephant, a tilted house, and an enormous screaming head with a gaping mouth. Visitors can go inside the gaping mouth, known as the Mouth of Hell, where they'll find a picnic table large enough to accommodate a small group. Duke of Bolzano Pier Francesco Orsini, an avid supporter of the arts, commissioned the Parco dei Monstri's construction in 1552. It came following a series of traumatic events, including a brutal war, the murder of Orsini's best friend, being held for ransom for several years, and his wife's death. Orsini hired the respected architect Piero Ligorio to help him create a villa of wonders inspired by his grief. The sculptures were built over several decades and took a less sinister tone with time. His last monument, a temple dedicated to his second wife, was built 20 years after the park opened. The garden became neglected and overgrown during the 19th century, but was restored after Salvador Dalí created a short film about it during the 1950s. It remains a popular tourist attraction to this day. Number 7. The Stone Head of Guatemala. In 1987, a notary, lawyer, and doctor of philosophy named Dr. Rafael Padilla received a photo of a unique face-shaped monolith that was supposedly located somewhere in the Guatemalan jungle. The picture showed a large head carved out of stone, was reportedly taken in 1950 by the owner of the property it was located on. Padilla was unable to obtain information on the mysterious structure's precise location because the landowner had recently passed away. The picture sparked controversy not only because of the inability to locate the stone head, but because the face seemed to possess distinctly Caucasian features, like thin lips and a long nose. Skeptics pointed out that these characteristics were uncommon among almost all of South America's pre-Hispanic inhabitants. Unsatisfied with the limited information available on the sculpture, author and explorer David Hatcher Childress tracked down Dr. Padilla for a one-on-one conversation. Padilla said that he had in fact gotten in touch with the property's owners, who told him exactly where to find the stone head. When he reached the site, the face had allegedly been obliterated by anti-government rebels, and it was disfigured so badly it was no longer recognizable. With no evidence that the megalith actually existed, many remain in doubt and wonder if the photograph was somehow faked. Number 6. Sigiriya. Built during the 5th century, Sigiriya is an ancient fortress that was built into a nearly 660-foot-tall rock column in the Sri Lankan jungle. With a series of passageways and a set of lion's paws carved into the base, the structure's name appropriately translates to Lion's Rock. Commissioned by Sinhalese King Kashyapa I, the fortress served as the kingdom's capital until 495 AD, when Kashyapa was defeated and died. His palace, which sits atop the colossal rock in ruins, was decorated with large, colorful frescoes that appeared to depict celestial singers and dancers called apsaras. There was also a mirror wall that was so well polished people could easily see their reflections in it. The site was equipped with elaborate water-retaining technology, and some of these systems still work today. Some of the world's oldest known landscaped gardens can also be found at Sigiriya. The palace served as a Buddhist monastery during the 14th century before it was once again abandoned, and the surrounding forest eventually consumed the formation, limiting knowledge of it to locals and Buddhist texts. British historians rediscovered the site during the 19th century after Britain seized control of Sri Lanka, then called Ceylon. Today, it's a UNESCO World Heritage Site. Would you like to visit Sigiriya? Tell us in the comments and hit that subscribe button while you're at it. Number 5. Bizarre extinct mammal. 220 million years ago, when the supercontinent Pangaea still existed, what is now Arizona was located near the equator. The environment was likely tropical, humid, and filled with lush vegetation, much unlike today's dry desert landscape. It was home to a hamster-sized early mammal that was identified in 2020 after paleontologists found the creature's fossilized jawbone in Arizona's Petrified Forest National Park. Dubbed Kaigiddon Venetus, the strange-looking species was classified as a member of a group called cynodonts, which included early mammals and their close relatives. Like today's mammals, K. venetus had incisor, canine, and post-canine teeth, but it was considered a close cousin rather than a true mammal. And researchers are unsure whether it had fur, but they think it probably did. Cynodont fossils are rarely found in North America, but are common along the American East Coast, South America, and Southern Africa. According to the team who performed the study, their tendency to live in lush, tropical environments indicates that humid climates played an important role in the evolution of early mammals. And they believe there may be more cynodont fossils in North America waiting to be found. Number 4. A 4-million-year-old forest. A recent study of fossilized leaves found in Borneo revealed that the island's rainforests are around 4 million years old. Filled mostly with trees from the Dipterocarpaceae family, these ancient landscapes look very similar today to how they looked between 5.3 and 2.6 million years ago, during the Pliocene epoch. In a world that's constantly changing, it's a surprising discovery. Borneo's forests contain at least 270 dipterocarp species, and during the study, scientists found more dipterocarp fossils than any other plant group. They're among the world's tallest trees, with some reaching heights of up to 328 feet. Experts say it's crucial to preserve them as tropical Asian biodiversity becomes increasingly threatened by climate change, logging, agriculture, and other damaging effects of human activity. While most old-growth rainforests in the Brunei part of Borneo are still preserved, they're disappearing elsewhere on the island. If the dipterocarp trees vanish, they'll not only take 4 million years of their own history with them, but the unique wildlife that lives in the forests and that scientists are still learning about and discovering. Number 3. Corpse flower. The tropical rainforests of Sumatra and Borneo are home to the world's biggest and most foul-smelling flower. Known as the corpse flower, it typically reaches a diameter of around 3.3 feet and weighs as much as 24 pounds. It emits an extremely unpleasant odor similar to decaying flesh, and while it may repel humans, the insects that pollinate it are attracted to it. The corpse flower is parasitic. It grows on the vines of only one host plant called the Indian chestnut vine. Only its 5-petaled flower can be seen outside of the host plant. Corpse flowers are either male or female, and both are needed to reproduce. It's a lengthy process. When a plant is ready to reproduce, it takes about a year to bud. Once the flower opens up, it lasts for just a few days. This is when the corpse flower really begins to stink, luring the beetles and flies it depends on for pollination. Despite its horrific smell, the plant attracts curious human visitors. In fact, there's been a noticeable decrease in budding corpse flowers in popular tourist areas. The species has not been assessed for the IUCN Red List, which keeps the most comprehensive records of the world's threatened plants and animals. But it's believed that ecotourism is posing a threat to corpse flowers, which are already considered rare to begin with. Number 2. The Lost City of the Monkey God. During an expedition to Honduras in early 2015, researchers discovered the ruins of a mysterious city built by an unknown culture. Long-standing rumors of a so-called White City, also known as the City of the Monkey God, and aerial mapping led the team into a remote uninhabited part of the Mosquitia rainforest. There they found extensive plazas, mounds, earthworks, and an earthen pyramid. The archaeologists also uncovered a series of stone sculptures that had been left untouched since the day the settlement was abandoned. The once thriving civilization that built the site around 1,000 years ago mysteriously vanished. Experts don't know what they called themselves or why they suddenly up and left. The discovery of an unlooted and well-preserved settlement like this is exceptionally rare, according to Mesoamerican archaeologist Christopher Fisher, who spoke with National Geographic. He believes that the cache of stone sculptures which were left undisturbed at the pyramid's base may have been left as a ritual offering. They were found with the tops of some of the sculptures peeking through the ground, while many others were completely buried. The collection consisted of ceremonial seats and decorated vessels featuring snakes, vultures, and zoomorphic figures, including a were-jaguar. Indigenous legend holds that the White City functioned as a refuge for native people fleeing Spanish conquistadors, and that those who went there never returned to where they came from. Archaeologists and explorers tried to find it numerous times starting in the 1920s, but the first promising evidence of its location appeared in 2012 after an aerial survey was conducted using LiDAR technology, which enables scientists to see through thick vegetation and underground. The only known person to have supposedly found the site before its more recent discovery mysteriously committed suicide, taking knowledge of its whereabouts to his grave. To protect the ruins from vandalism, archaeologists did not disclose its exact location, but the White City may not remain a well-kept secret for long due to deforestation, which threatens to expose it through the destruction of the rainforest. Number 1. A man-made rainforest. One of Charles Darwin's least known accomplishments lives on today in the form of a man-made rainforest on the remote island of Ascension. Located in the South Atlantic just south of the equator, the 33-square-mile landmass was once nothing more than a barren volcanic outcrop. Darwin arrived there in 1836 and found the environment to be so hideous that he set forth a plan to create a lush artificial ecosystem. But doing so would prove to be a challenge thanks to Ascension's arid atmosphere, which lacked a freshwater source and where the rain evaporated almost entirely. At Darwin's urging, a botanist and explorer named Joseph Hooker convinced the Royal Navy to go along with the idea. Tree and plant shipments from botanical gardens in Europe, South Africa, and Argentina began arriving on the island in 1850. They were planted on Green Mountain, which sits at an altitude of more than 2,000 feet above sea level. Things worked out surprisingly well. The trees captured and absorbed rain, causing less moisture to evaporate. The soil became richer, and a diverse array of species thrived by the late 1870s, including Norfolk Island pines, banana trees, bamboo, and eucalyptus. Ascension's rainforest is especially impressive because it sprang up in just 150 years. Even when conditions are conducive, this highly complex type of environment usually takes much longer to form. Scientists are looking to the rainforest on Green Mountain for potential clues about how they could someday grow plants on Mars.
11. Sopwith Camel. Perhaps the best remembered British warplane is the Sopwith Camel. The fighting machine entered service in the summer of 1917, helping to change the Royal Flying Corps' future. It was a peculiar machine, driven by a rotary engine that rotated so quickly it would spin out of control. But crafty pilots used this unique situation to whip around faster than their enemy and move them into a controlling position behind their opponents, turning the Camel into a splendid fighting aircraft. This one was part of the Royal Navy, serial number N6812, but became part of the newly formed Royal Air Force in 1918. The plane was being towed on a floating launch ramp behind a destroyer. On August 11, 1918, it was making the rounds of the North Sea. Earlier patrols had been endangered by Zeppelins flying overhead. So, when search team spotted one in the distance, Lieutenant Stuart Cully, a Canadian, was ordered to take off from his hazardous stage and shoot it down. Cully ascended at full throttle toward the unfriendly airship for more than an hour. When the lieutenant reached his position, he rotated to attack with 2 machine guns secure on the upper wing. One weapon jammed, but Cully still dumped all the bullets from the other into the German airship. As he flew away, the Zeppelin burst into flames and plunged 18,000 feet down towards the sea as he flew away. This Zeppelin was the final one ever shot down. Lieutenant Cully's celebrated warplane has been on display at the Imperial War Museum since 1935. 10. World War I Pompeii. In late 2019, the remains of dozens of World War I soldiers were properly laid to rest with full military honors where they sacrificed their lives over a century ago. The burials came amid an archaeological project known as Dig Hill 80, thanks to crowdfunding support. In Belgium, the site was excavated by a devoted team who dedicated their time to digging and raising the awareness and money necessary to carry out the project. The team unearthed the remains of at least 110 soldiers and dozens of artifacts, including bullets, rifles, revolvers, helmets, buttons, uniforms, belt buckles, and personal items like watches, toothbrushes, cooking utensils, water bottles, and a harmonica. Writing for the Daily Mail, British Belizean businessman Lord Michael Ashcroft described what it was like to see these artifacts in person, including a sauce bottle that, in his words, a British soldier had brought to the front lines, perhaps keen to disguise the grim taste of wartime rations. He also spoke with lead archaeologist Simon Verdigum, who said that his primary motivation for exploring the site was a quote from a German lieutenant who served in the war, saying, "The men don't fear death anymore. We have made our peace with the thought of our own demise. A much heavier burden is the fear to be forgotten in foreign soil, an inglorious end for any soldier." 9. Fredmans Badge. Alex Mason was searching for treasure with his metal detector in Charleston, South Carolina in 2020, when his device alerted him to a buried object in someone's backyard. The two friends he'd started the day with had given up on finding anything, but Alex remained determined and his efforts paid off. He dug just a few inches into the ground and retrieved a shield-shaped badge belonging to a soldier from the Niagara Fire Company, an all-black volunteer brigade that served in the Civil War. The badge is inscribed with the year 1861. The war started that April, and in December, the Great Fire of 1861 destroyed a large portion of Charleston. Many black fire brigades combated the flames, and these brave firefighters became increasingly important throughout the war. Starting in the late 18th century, formerly enslaved people in Charleston were required to register with the city clerk's office and get a Fredmans Badge to identify them as non-slave. The badge bore the initials WPP and was traced back to a brigade member named William P. Perry, who survived the war and lived until 1892. It's just a handful of its kind ever found. 8. Hand-to-hand combat weapons. On July 15, 1410, 15,000 soldiers marched into combat in the Battle of Grunwald. It was one of the most significant battles of medieval Europe and was part of a bigger conflict called the Polish-Lithuanian Teutonic War. The war was fought between the German Teutonic Knights Order and the Allied Kingdom of Poland and the Grand Duchy of Lithuania. The Polish-Lithuanian alliance fought against the Teutonic Knights' expansion along the Baltic Sea's southeastern coast, ending in a defeat of the Teutonic leadership. Most Teutonic soldiers were killed or taken prisoner, but the Polish-Lithuanian victory came at an immense cost, claiming thousands of lives on both sides of the battlefield. While sweeping the famous site in modern-day North Poland in 2020, metal detectorists found 2 battle axes dating back to the 600-year-old skirmish. Dozens of artifacts, including swords and spearheads, have been found at the site, but these are the only 2 known axe heads to be left behind from the battle, and they vary in design, with one having a longer, closed shaft and the other having a shorter, open shaft. Archaeologists were shocked by how intact the weapons were, and the discovery sparked an influx of experts and volunteers to the battlefield, hoping to discover more fascinating artifacts. 7. Ghost railroad tracks. Following a fierce coastal storm recently along the New Jersey coast, Cape May resident Liz Goldsmith saw some World War I-era railroad tracks. They were revealed by the storm, along with coastal erosion and the daily low tide. Dating back to the early 20th century, the 100-foot, 30.5-meter stretch of track was first spotted in 2014. They've appeared a handful of times since then, usually after significant weather events. NJ.com reported the tracks were used for sand mining and World War I munition testing. According to local historian Ben Miller, some of the sand that was transported along them was used to make cement that went into building the Panama Canal. The operation was suspended in 1936 after local authorities became concerned that the sand harvesting activities were depleting the area's beaches. The tracks sit just a few miles south of another set of railroad tracks along a beach where the Bethlehem Steel Corporation exploded ordnances and fired shells into the sand in tests that were carried out for the US military and its allies. Do you think the track should be left in place as a historical marker or removed because of a potential safety hazard? Let us know in the comments, and remember to subscribe if you haven't already. 6. Unexploded Civil War bomb. While conducting a metal detecting survey for a new hiking trail in Kennesaw Mountain National Battlefield in Georgia earlier this year, archaeologists and volunteers discovered an intact Civil War bomb. They dug the 157-year-old 10-pound, 4.5-kilogram explosive known as a parrot shell up from 10 inches, 25 centimeters beneath the surface, and moved it to a safe place so a local bomb squad could safely discharge the weapon. It resembled a bomb commonly used by the Union Army and was probably left behind from the Battle of Kennesaw Mountain. Fought on June 27, 1864 between Union General William T. Sherman's forces and the Confederate Army of Tennessee, the skirmish technically ended with a Confederate victory. But it wasn't enough for the Confederate Army to stop Sherman's forces from marching onward to Atlanta. The fight was part of a series of battles known as the Atlanta Campaign, which saw 67,000 soldiers wounded, captured, and killed. In a Facebook post, the Southeast Archaeological Center explained they found the bomb on the last day of the project, and it was thankfully equipped with a percussion fuse that didn't ignite when it hit the ground. 5. A Cuban soldier's defiant message. During the early 1960s, Cuba built a system of bunkers and trenches along the coast for if the US or any other Western powers invaded the island. In addition, the country was receiving economic aid from the Soviet Union. And while there was technically no actual combat going on between world powers, people around the globe feared Cold War tensions could erupt into nuclear warfare at any moment. This arguably came closest to happening in 1962 during a 13-day standoff between the US and the Soviet Union, known as the Cuban Missile Crisis. The disagreement was sparked by the installation of Soviet missiles in Cuba, which sits just 90 miles, 145 kilometers from the nearest American coastline. Archaeologists were recently documenting the Cuban bunkers when they discovered a message stating in Spanish that surrender wasn't an option, and that if war broke out, the individual was determined to fight. They believe a Cuban soldier wrote it, and it's one of several messages archaeologists have found on the walls of the bunkers. The interconnected system comprised many concrete bunkers, each with an opening that faced the Caribbean Sea, along with a rear entrance and 2 side exits. They've been abandoned since after the missile crisis ended, and while some remain intact, others are damaged from coastal erosion and other effects of time. 4. A mysterious headstone. Earlier this year, Richard and John Ryan were walking along the Cuyahoga River in Cuyahoga Falls, Ohio, when they spotted an odd-shaped stone in a nearby clearing. They wiped the dirt that had caked onto the surface, revealing an inscription that said Thaddeus J. Peck, 1711 to 1781. Realizing they'd just found something of historical value, the pair contacted the Cuyahoga Falls Historical Society. It's a strange discovery, dating back to several decades before Ohio was established in 1803 and before the Cuyahoga Falls settlement was founded in 1812. Whoever Thaddeus Peck was, he'd been spending time in the wilderness at 70, which was quite old when the average life expectancy in the US was 38 years old. When Peck died, the Revolutionary War was in full swing. The Declaration of Independence was just 5 years old, and the Continental Army, led by General George Washington, would continue butting heads with the British for another 2 years. Nobody has shed insight on Peck's identity or his reason for being in the middle of the Ohio forest. It's unclear what his profession was, but it's believed that it may have brought him into the area. His grave marker proves that he wasn't alone when he died. Researchers are working to understand these answers, hopefully. Meanwhile, the 200-pound, 91-kilogram headstone has been removed and is in possession of a local museum. 3. Trove of Civil War artifacts. Built in northwestern Alabama during the 1830s, a stagecoach stop and inn known as Pope's Tavern served as a hospital and command center for the Union and Confederate forces at various points throughout the American Civil War. It was a longer road that was built to connect Nashville and New Orleans under the command of General Andrew Jackson, who later became the 7th US president. Last year, archaeologists found a trove of artifacts at Pope's Tavern, including pottery, glass, and nails that may predate the pub's construction. They also discovered the remains of a brick building that may have functioned as an outhouse, a hearth, or an outbuilding. According to the latest update, experts were performing a microscopic analysis of the building materials, hoping to uncover more information about their origins. While Pope's Tavern is most commonly remembered as a place where many died when all men between ages 16 and 60 were ordered to serve in the Civil War, it's believed that there may be earlier ruins beneath it, and that there's even more to the tale of its rich history. 2. Bronze rams. On March 10, 241 BC, in the Battle of the Agadi Islands, a Roman fleet of ships destroyed a fleet of Carthaginian vessels off Sicily's northwestern coast. They sank to the bottom of the Mediterranean Sea. It marked the end of the First Punic War with a Roman victory. During these sea battles, warships deliberately crashed into one another to sink the enemy or get close enough to an opponent's vessel to board it and engage in hand-to-hand combat. During the Battle of the Agadi Islands, hundreds of warships collided as the Carthaginian fleet attempted to reach its resupplying station in Sicily. To protect against damage and maximize the level of destruction against adversaries, militaries of the time equipped their ships with metal rams. Last year, archaeologists found the remains of some of the wrecked ships from the Battle of the Agadi Islands scattered along the seafloor, where they've sat for nearly 2,000 years. Since then, they've recovered 6 bronze rams, several bronze helmets, Roman and Greek coins, and dozens of slinger bullets, which were used as deadly projectiles during the battle. It's one of the best documented archaeological battle wrecks to date. Besides offering new insight into the Battle of the Agadi Islands, the discovery has led to several other findings, including a nearby merchant shipwreck dating to the 3rd century. 1. Ancient Greek helmets. Earlier this year, archaeologists in southern Italy announced the discovery of 2 helmets, weapon and armor fragments, pottery shards, and the ruins of a temple to Athena in the ancient Greek city of Velia. They said they believed the items were connected to a maritime skirmish that happened 2,500 years ago, known as the Battle of Alalia. For 5 painstaking years between 540 and 535 BC, the Greeks battled an Etruscan-Carthaginian alliance off the coast of Corsica. The Greeks had set up a nearby colony, Alalia, and defeated the 120-ship Punic Etruscan fleet with just 60 ships. But the Greek victory came at a cost, and the violence prompted many of Alalia's residents to move along the coast of southern Italy, where they were closer to other Greek settlements. One of the recently discovered helmets was designed in the Greek Chalcidian style. Developed during the 6th century, it has one of the widest geographic ranges of all Greek helmets. The other helmet resembled the headpieces worn by Etruscan fighters and may have been stolen from defeated troops during the Battle of Alalia. Besides the helmets, archaeologists unearthed the remains of what appears to be a temple to the Greek goddess of war Athena, some vases, and a Greek inscription translating to the word sacred. The 60 by 23 foot, 18 by 7 meter ruins were found at Velia, the new settlement established by those who fled Alalia in 540 BC. Do you think wartime artifacts belong in museums, or should private citizens be allowed to own them? Share your thoughts in the comments, and make sure to subscribe to the channel to show your support. See you next time.